when you have a circle of people, you have a community, and someone is not in that circle. That's exactly the challenge that the youth voice is just identifying. You feel left out, and this we closely associate with the absence of security. When you're not connected to the community, when you're not part of the whole. So maybe in my short, I think it's 15 minutes, maybe.
7 to 10.
Okay. So let's just pretend that this is not a classroom situation. I will not read from any notes. Let's just story, like the story we've just started with. I note that in the previous sessions, one of the sessions might have talked about definitions, security definitions. I'm sorry I missed that one, but I suppose the sessions might have covered quite a lot of comprehensively what the common popular definitions of security might be. Right now in the huge meetings that governments attend, that CSOs attend, the UN, Pacific Regional Forum, I hear that the Forum Security Committee meetings happening. Those definitions, hopefully at the end of my little chat, one of the recommendations that we intend to put forward will have to do with something, with definitions. Kasi used the term reframing. We'll come back to that. But I'd just like to start off on that word, on that concept of definitions, of conceptions. A lot of seminars, a lot of lectures, a lot of talks on security and peace these days start to use language that reflect the nature of conceptions, how we understand or define security, how we define peace. You'll hear speakers often saying that now more and more security is no longer that set in stone kind of thing. Military arms, armies, borders, nation states, jurisdictions. It's less of that. Now the language is tending to include more and more, or social security. The definition of security, the definition of peace is actually a social construction. It's something that is constructed. It's someone put that definition together. It's someone's understanding of what this security looks like, or what it means, what peace looks like, what it doesn't look like. So someone, not some system, someone or some people put this construction together. Why does a group of people put a construction together? Is it just because we want security? We want this construction to work in our life. We would like to argue that social constructions are put together in order to serve an underlying purpose. It's not just we define security as the absence of conflict or the absence of threat. You have security definitions, even formulas. Security equals threat plus vulnerability plus risk. And then you assign numerical values to, or the threat rating is 5 out of 10, the vulnerability rating is maybe 7 out of 10, and the risk ratio is 5:6. And then you add, multiply, whatever, and that equals your level of security or insecurity. So it's taken us all the way to a game of numbers, number crunching. Which brings me to maybe let out this hint about the second recommendation that we will be hoping to put forward at the end of the presentation. It's not about concepts, ideas, mathematics. It brings us all the way back to the human person and the relationships we have with one another. I'll come back to that again later. So it serves a purpose, serves somebody's purpose. Maybe the challenge is to identify who exactly formed that construction, whose purpose exactly does that construction serve. because it is constructed by someone or some people, it is subjective. A group of people will define it this way, another group will define it that way. So in seminars like we have today, we'll hear more and more of this kind of language coming in, which is, I guess, a good thing, because once upon a time, if I recall correctly, I stand to be corrected, my colleagues from the ministry, we go to security committee meetings way back then, and there's no argument at all about what we mean by, well, not much argument, not many questions about what we mean by security. It's defined. Security after 9/11 meant we have to focus on our border control, the X-ray machines, the policy, the budgets that we use. That's how our aid is going to be channeled. Yes, education stuff, but without proper border security, without secure environment against terrorist threat, our education, our health system will suffer. So the priorities go like this. So in that kind of context, there's not much questioning about what should be our own definition of security. In this room, as citizens of this country, for example, what is the thing that we hold most dear and that we'd like to defend, protect? We'll talk about interests maybe, but what is good for all of us, and what is that thing that we would like to secure or to protect against insecurity? So there's an underlying interest there, and so it's subjective. A group of women will talk about this. It's going to be framed from a particular perspective. Men perhaps framed from a particular perspective. And so there's a danger also in being led by self-interest. Interest becomes a driving force, and so it's me, it's us. Never mind about that group. Maybe if we have space, we accommodate. And so the circle starts to fragment. People start to get left out. It's also, security is also referred to now as something that is negotiated. So we have our different definitions, we have our different most important things that we like to secure, and then we have to come to some agreement at some stage because we are from the same country or from the same community, etc. What is our number one priority? How do we prioritize? Because there can be many different perspectives, and in order to respect everyone, in order to ensure that everyone belongs, that no one is left out, the circle has to be open to everyone participating. And one thing that should be noted is that the circle, even though it's complete, everyone in this room is included in the circle. It doesn't mean that we're all equal. Some will come into the circle with more resources perhaps, more experience, more capability. Some will come with less, or some will come with stronger, more serious issues than others. So the process of discussing and coming to agreement of what our security priorities are does not happen in a space where everybody is equal. It happens in a space where we have to take into account inequalities amongst us. And the key thing here is that because our dignity is all equal, we will give the other in the group, the other member of the community, your greatest, respect, your affirmation. It will not only be about me all the time. It will be about us. And in order to get us secure, maybe I need to hold back a little bit on my own interest in order that that person may be included, or that person's security might be assured. That brings us to the idea of the human person. Now it's recentering, reframing. It's not about figures. It's not about, we secure our borders in order that something else like our economic development can happen. This document that we all have in our files, let me just, this is not to critique or anything. I'm just using it as an example. The page where you have background, the first sentence. In a lot of situations you have constructions like these, sentences like, conflict undermines all of our collective efforts and hopes for development. And if we're not careful, This sentence is of course qualified in the paragraphs below. A lot of the documents that we come across in meetings are, in order for us to have development again, what does it mean? Development in this age means more and more growth, more and more economic production, more and more economic consumption, more and more profits. In order for us to have all of that, profits, growth, more and more wealth, that kind of lifestyle, we'll have to eliminate all conflict, eliminate all violence. We have to assure that there's peace in order to get this development. So it's not the human security anymore that's the number one thing. It's something else. It's money, it's progress in terms of amount of cars I have, my salary, etc., etc. Material in nature. So we've removed the central most important thing that should be in the middle of this whole discussion, the human person and our relationships. This we need to secure in order to get something else, material. So the reframing starts to, it starts to become clear that there's a reframing that needs to happen. So brings me to our proposition to this gathering. I of course speak as a staff member of the Secretariat of the Pacific Conference of Churches, and as my colleague Kasi would have shared with you, I guess I'm merely reaffirming what might have been shared yesterday and this morning. In order to move forward, there needs to be some serious reframing. That is, in our view, a priority. So that we stop just focusing on symptoms of a system. We invest more in equal education, equal opportunity, but then I'm not saying that we stop all of these initiatives, that we take away our attention from focusing on gaining more equality, more women's representation, etc. By no means do we stop those efforts. What I'm trying to say is that the reframing that needs to happen, we need to dig a little bit, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels deeper. What system underlies this reality that we live in today that end up in the kind of problems that force us to have to answer questions of, to address situations of inequality? What is the underlying system that we need to address in order to bring about recognition of each other's dignity, inclusion of everyone in the community? So what is it like to be insecure? As I said in the beginning, insecurity can easily mean when someone has got no relationships. I've got 2 minutes. I've got a couple of deaths in the family right now, in the Rutuman community here in Suva. And something that again comes up is that the ability and the willingness of the community to immediately come together and help carry that burden. There's no discussion of money, or hopefully not. I haven't heard. But it's we need to go and be with that relative. They're going through something. We need to go and commune. But it's these kinds of practices that have been passed down through the generations that maybe we need to look back and draw lessons from. It's about relationships. Person is poor now. A lot of people's definitions of person is poor now when the salary level is not up to a certain percentage. And the country is poor when we measure you according to your economic production capacity, and your GDP is only about this much. There's no more talk about this country is rich because of its relationships, the closeness between men and women, the inclusion of its youth, the security of the old people. They are not sent into old people's homes necessarily, but are looked after. Their social security networks are still strong. These are aspects of security that are kind of falling off the popular table of discussion on security. So maybe that will be the kind of direction that the conference would like to suggest that these kinds of meetings, including this one, take into consideration when you're doing your outcome statements and moving forward. So one, investing resources into our relationships, social and political relationships, inclusion, you know, so for the decision making in this country, for example, now, who are making the decisions? Is it just government? Is government making use of the full resource package that it has? It's young people, it's chiefs, it's women. And secondly, and I connect this next point to your discussions yesterday on celebrating the NFIP, the self-determination aspect. As Kasi said, we need to reframe. It needs to be our story, not the story that was told to us after 9/11. We need to invest in border control. Not saying that border control should be done away with, but you know, the priorities should recognize other key things. Terrorism perhaps is not our thing in the Pacific. It's somebody else's. We need our relationships are more important than perhaps terrorist risk and threats. So reclaiming that space, being self-determining in the way we approach discussions on security. I'll stop at that point.